maybe we will, well, let's get started, okay? So, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Storfer. I'm a professor in the Urban Planning Department, and I'm here in my role as the director of the Global Public Affairs Program at UCLA, which is one of the two sponsors of this talk today, the other being the Institute of Transportation Studies. And so this is a cooperative venture between our two research groups. And let me give some background. So I want to welcome Antoine Courmont, who's from Paris. And there's another background I want to give you all if you don't know it, which is that the Urban Planning Department has been developing and deepening its connections to the university from which Antoine comes, which is the Institute of Political Studies, or kind of more vernacularly known as Sciences Po, which is one of the most important social science research universities in France. Almost all of the presidents of France went to Sciences Po. And we in urban planning, we have an organized exchange program. Our students go to Sciences Po for a term, and Sciences Po students come to UCLA because we cooperate with a master's degree program at Sciences Po known as Governing the Large Metropolis. And coming in the future, what's in the works is something very exciting, which is that UCLA, our urban planning department, and Sciences Po's Governing the Large Metropolis are in the final stages of negotiating to have a full 2-year double degree program with Sciences Po, which in a couple of years from now means that students will be able to come to UCLA for the first year, get a Master of Urban Planning degree here, a MERP degree as we give now, go for the second year at Sciences Po, and get a second master's degree from Sciences Po. And no urban planning program in America has ever done this before. So we're very excited about this, this deepening connection with Sciences Po. And it's in that context that it's especially nice that Antoine has come here to present his research. So Antoine did his PhD in political science at Sciences Po, one of our departments. And he is currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for European Studies. And the other thing that Antoine does, and that we have that's very exciting, I say we because I'm also a professor at Sciences Po. It's one of my other identities. That's why I'm doing the we thing. I'm a we here and a we there. But we have a group, a cities and digital technology chair. It's a research group. And it's quite exciting because it involves academics, but it also involves a lot of prominent French companies who are involved in cities, infrastructure, and technology. And Antoine is organizing a research program for considering how digital technologies are changing the way our cities function, the way urban life works, and all those kind of things. So Antoine is going to talk, I think, about research that's derived from his doctoral work, right? Coming out of your doctoral work, which is about big data, the recomposition of urban governance in the digital era, with a case study of the Waze application, which I think probably all of us know. And I should also mention that Antoine has begun to start to immerse himself in his visit here in trying to understand how our transportation authorities and other actors are dealing with some of the same issues that have come up in the Paris region. So, Antoine, thank you very much for coming. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Michael, for the presentation and the invitation. I am very pleased to present you today some elements of an ongoing research about the effect of digital platforms on urban governance. And so I am a French political scientist, and my work focuses on the recomposition of public institutions in the digital era. And to do that, I focus on the production and use of data by public and private actors in urban policies. So I will present today a small part of all my research about private data and the Waze application. And it's work. Yeah. So to start about data and urban policies, public administrations have always used data at the national or at local level. Data are traditional tools of government, such as statistics, accounting, or benchmarking, and all of that have been analyzed by a branch of sociology, which is sociology of quantification. However, today we assist nowadays at the emergence of a new form of quantification, which is commonly called big data. And big data can be defined as a large amount of massive, exhaustive, various, and real-time data. This quantification is new for two reasons. First, it's a change of level. Our digital society produces a huge amount of data. But there is also a change in the nature of data. A new kind of data is produced, the digital traces. Before, indeed, data were mainly static and descriptive. For instance, a map or a census or a photography at one moment of the territory of the population. Now, with the development of digital technologies and especially with the smartphone, we can record in real time every activity or individual practices of the city and all behavior of people. And what is quite interesting is that jointly with this new kind of quantification, new kind of data, we have also new actors which have appeared inside the urban government, the digital platforms. And the specificity of the activity of this digital platform is to be based on the capacity of collecting, analyzing, and using these digital traces. So, the question I want to address today is this one. To what extent this new form of quantification disrupts local public policies? To answer this question, I will follow an approach of sociology of data, political sociology of urban data. And this approach is anchored in the continuity of the work of a French sociologist of quantification, which name is Alain Desrosières. And Desrosières focused his work on statistics, and his work is quite interesting because he followed a twofold perspective by combining an internal and external analysis of statistics. What does it mean? It means that internal analysis of data is to answer some questions such as how the data are made, what do data represent, or what are the representations inscribed into the data. And whereas the external analysis is all the actors associated with data, who produce, own, and use the data. So it's a twofold approach, both a social and a cognitive one. And my approach also aims to follow the data from its production to its use, to highlight its circulation between social worlds, and so question the interaction and coordination between public and private actors inside the urban government. And what I'm interested in all the data is the process of datafication. That is to say, the pathway between the world and the reality. The world and the reality are two concepts established by another French sociologist, Luc Boltanski. And Boltanski defines the world as everything that happens, whereas the reality is all the formatting and representation of the world. The reality is very important to produce agreement and to produce agreement between actors and to coordinate themselves. reality allows people to agree, to coordinate, and to construct a common world by sharing similar representation of one thing of the world. And Boltanski adds another point by saying that reality is established and stabilized by institutions. So institutions have a semantic power to tell what it is. They do that through law, science, statistics, cartography, and data. And this distinction between world and reality is very interesting because it's not a realist approach saying that reality exists per se. Neither a constructivist one or a relativist one. Reality is constructed, but at the end, through the semantic power of institutions, it exists. And so, through data, public institutions produce a reality and establish a stabilized representation of the world. I will explain it later with the case of congestion, traffic, and data and waste. And this semantic power is really at the core of the creation of the nation state in the 19th century, for instance, with the work of standardization of the national space through cartography, or of its population through statistics and census. But now, with what does change with big data? To tackle the question of the effects of big data on urban government, I will follow two hypotheses during this presentation on this, based on this conceptual framework. First, my first hypothesis is to say that by offering a new representation of the world, big data disturbs the stable adjustment of the reality which was constructed by public institutions. So now you have two coexisting realities, the public one and the private one or big data one, and the one established by digital platforms such as Waze. And this alternative production of reality will produce also different kind of regulation of public space, of urban space, and that will provoke tensions and conflict with local authorities. However, when we focus on the production, on the modalities of production of this data, we see that there are some kind of convergence, some kind of compromise between these two realities. And this will allow new forms of coordination through data between public and private actors. And to demonstrate this hypothesis, I will focus on one case study, which is the Waze app. I think everybody knows the Waze app. I don't know if you are all users of Waze or not, but it's quite well known. And the effects of Waze on local transportation policies. So Waze, just to know how many of you are Waze users? Well, not so much.
Well, you have to ask how many people are drivers. That's the first question.
Yeah, how many people are drivers? And okay, so only some of you are using Waze. What else are you using?
Google Maps.
Google Maps. Okay, so that's a competitor. All right.
Well, in France, people use mainly Waze and not so much Google Maps to drive. And so, but Waze is an Israeli startup. It was funded in 2008, and it is a routing app based on users' data collected in real time. So it was bought by Google in 2013 for a little less than $1 billion. And France is one of Waze's top countries of use. So I will mainly focus on France, but I have also some insights in Los Angeles on the effects of Waze in some neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And in France, the app is massively used with 10 million of active users each month, which raises some critical issues for public local authorities in charge of traffic regulation. So here, it's I don't know if you can see. Yeah. it's a map with top 15 cities of Waze use. And you can notice that, that Waze is mainly used in the US, in Latin America, in Europe, and in Southeast Asia. And concerning cities, so New York is the first one, Sao Paulo second, Paris third, just before Los Angeles. And when we focus on Europe, we remark that Paris is the main city, obvious, but what is quite interesting is that in Paris, you have three times more users than in London, the second city in Europe. I don't know exactly you have also 5 French cities in the top 10 of European cities. Why Waze is so much used in France? I do not have exactly the answer. One explanation could be that on Waze you have the ability to indicate the precise location of a speed radar, and it was a very popular service in France when Waze was launched in 2010. And here you can see the evolution of Waze user in France since its introduction in 2010, and it is still growing with last year a 2 million gain of users between January and December. So now it's more or less 10 million of users, and it's quite a lot for France because it means that in France we have about 50 million of French people who are owning a smartphone. So it's 1 French in 5 which has a smartphone is using Waze. So it's quite impressive the number of users of Waze in France. And what type of Waze is mainly used on a daily basis? For commute, you can see here on this chart the weekdays. So in Paris, you have the 5 weekdays, and the morning and the evening peak of simultaneous active users of Waze. And it's I do not have this chart for Los Angeles, but I think it's quite similar, and it's similar in other cities in France. And the Waze company can be considered as a new urban actor, a new kind of urban companies, which and why we can what are the main characteristics of Waze compared to traditional urban companies, and why it's quite interesting and why it raises issues for urban governance or for analysis. First, its activity is based on data. So it's quite obvious. It's a technological company without any physical infrastructure. So the development of the company is very fast. It was created in 2008, and now, 10 years later, it is present in more than 2,000 countries in the world. And its business model is based on advertising. So, thanks to all these elements, the company is totally independent from public authorities. It can deploy its services in all cities, in all countries, without any territorial presence, no prior contractualization with public authorities. It is quite new for an urban, for an urban actor, for a company, and this lack of interaction, of previous interaction with public authorities will raise the specific issue of regulation, as I will demonstrate it just now. So, after the introduction of Waze and the company, the first part of my demonstration is focused on the comparison between the traditional form of traffic regulation and the new one provided by the Waze app. I will focus on the data used for both regulations. And so, traditional traffic regulation by public authorities use data which are attached to infrastructure. The chain of data begins with magnetic sensors under the roadway. You can see it in the city of Lyon, in the south of France. So here you have a magnetic sensor. It's quite similar in Los Angeles. And these magnetic sensors detect the presence of vehicles. And the signals collected by these sensors are then sent through a complex fiber optical network to a control room, a center of calculation, which centralize and aggregate all these signals to produce the traffic data. The aggregation of the signals lead to flow and occupancy rates. So you can see here, for one word in the city of Lyon, the morning peak and the evening peak of the flow. And the data is then used by operators, so it's this kind of central room, to ensure smooth traffic flow by acting on traffic lights. So they can act on distance on traffic lights, and for each intersection they can choose the time of green for the traffic light, and the idea is to ensure smooth traffic flow on what they call green waves of traffic for successive traffic lights. And this data is also used to inform drivers of the condition of circulation on maps or on signs on the road. And I just want to draw your attention to the fact that the information is only available for the main roads. Indeed, implementing road sensor under the roadway is quite expensive, and so you can't put in all the roads, but only on the major roads. And so what my point is to say is that traditional traffic data is very attached to infrastructure. In contrast, Waze data are untied from road network. Waze data are attached to driver. Waze collects its user GPS location to monitor the driving speed in each road segment. And the Waze data have three main characteristics. First, they are crowdsourced. Thanks to this kind of data production, Waze is autonomous and independent from any public or private data providers. Secondly, Waze has data for all the roads, regardless the size or the domaniality who is in charge of the road. And third, Waze processes very valuable information, the driving speed, which is an information that public authorities have difficulties to know. And so, based on these two kinds of data, it is possible to highlight two different perceptions of what traffic congestion is. For public authorities, congestion is first and foremost a spatial problem. It means a saturation of the network which will constrain the fluidity of the traffic. So the data of public authorities represent flow of vehicles and they collect flow and occupancy rates. Their aim is to regulate the traffic, to maintain a smooth flow of vehicles, and to concentrate the traffic on main roads. In contrast, for Waze, congestion is a temporal problem. It means a deterioration of drivers' travel time. The motto of the company is to save every driver 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes per day, every day. This commitment reveals a very different approach of congestion. Congestion is framed through a temporal perspective, a time wasting, rather than a spatial one, a saturation. And so the aim of the company is to reduce congestion by distributing traffic on all public streets. And they will, the routing algorithm is made to prioritize the fastest itinerary regardless the size of the road. And so you have both representation of a similar problem, which is congestion, and both representation, both perception, a spatial perspective, and a temporal one. And it's two coexisting realities. And to sum up, there are two layers of regulation which coexist. It's not only two representation, two ways to represent the world, it's also two ways to regulate it and to act upon the urban space. The first one will target the flow of vehicles. It's like a network, a traditional network regulation, which aims to make traffic flow smoother by acting on the flow of vehicles and through occupancy rates data. So it's the first alignment of a way of thinking, a way of acting, and a way of representing an urban problem. The second one, the new one by Waze, is what we can call a post-network regulation. That is to say that the aim is to minimize travel time by acting not on flow but on individual drivers, thanks to real-time driving speed data on all roads, regardless the network, the type of the road, and so on. And so you have these two layers of regulation that coexist. One is focused on network, the other one on drivers. These two layers of regulation can consolidate each other. They can, the Waze regulation can be very complementary to the public one. It is the case, for instance, when you have accident, Waze is very useful for public authorities because it will quickly distribute the traffic to alternative roads. So it's one quotation from an interview I made with a traffic manager in Lyon, who told me that Waze solved this problem by routing drivers. They avoid to send us more traffic to difficult areas. But a little bit later on, during the same interview with the manager, he told me that it's also a problem, a big issue, because people now follow the GPS, no matter what public authorities indicate in traffic signs. So that means that their means of actions don't work anymore. And so they are no longer able to regulate the traffic flow. It is particularly the case, and it's a huge problem, when Waze route traffic through residential neighborhood. And so we have a similar problem in France, and here it's one example in Los Angeles. And it's very interesting because actually the Department of Transportation have made a survey. So we have some numbers of the number of vehicles in some roads. And so here it's in Shaman Oaks and the Cody Road. So during year-long studies, traffic officials found that more than 900 cars an hour were crowding streets, and it's a very tiny street with 20 feet wide. And this street was built for 2,000 cars a day, so it's a huge amount of traffic on residential neighborhoods. And so it will raise some issue about public safety, about environmental nuisance, pollution, noise for the inhabitants, but also about infrastructural impacts, because this kind of roads where the road surface were not conceived to absorb so much traffic, and so the cost of maintenance will be higher later. And so it's Los Angeles is quite interesting because you have lots of protests from inhabitants you have some council member who want to tackle this issue and who mobilize on it. And so yesterday on the Los Angeles Times, you could read that a council member from Los Angeles want the city to consider legal action against Waze to tackle this issue. And every week you have this kind of article. And so you have a conflict between, due to this new kind of data, these new actors, the digital platforms, you have a conflict between Waze and public institutions. And the later tell Waze is in contradiction with public policies. And for instance, they told me that Waze have an individualist view of mobility, which is in conflict with public policy, which aim to concentrate flow of cars on the main roads. And but the answer of Waze is to put the blame on the responsibility on public authorities and on urban planning. They say that it is a fundamental freedom to use all roads of the gridlock, and the problem, Waze is just a symptom. It's not the cause of the problem. The problem is about road infrastructure, which were not conceived to 50 million of people in the city, and so you have a congestion, and it's not a Waze problem. So you have this kind of conflict in France, in US, but also in other parts of the world, in Belgium, in Europe. You have also you have also this kind of conflict between public authorities and Waze, and it reveals what we can call the delinquents of public data. That is to say that public data is not useful anymore, is not efficient anymore to regulate traffic in a city. And indeed, big data challenged the public reality of road congestion by offering another frame and another perimeter of the issue of congestion. By doing so, it disrupts public authorities in their power to coordinate people through a common representation of reality. And by losing their capacity to prove, public institutions are challenged in their capacity of governing. However, in the second part of my talk, I would like to focus on the production of Waze data to explain that public institutions still have some powers to regulate Waze activity, and the regulation can be made through the production of Waze data. So you can act on data to co-produce traffic regulation. So Waze is based on 3 types of crowdsourced data. The first one, it's a very passive crowdsourcing with the traces provided by the location and speed of each user. So this is a very passive crowdsourced data, and it's obtained through GPS records. It will provide real-time traffic updates. The second one is the user's report. So when you are a Waze user, you can report events you can encounter during your drives, such as traffic jams or police traps, accidents or road closures. And the third one is a very active crowdsourcing contribution, because the base map of Waze is produced by a community of volunteer map editors, and the company provides an online map editing interface. You can see it here, and where each Waze user can update roads. You can add landmarks, house numbers, and other kind of information. And this community is very active, and the base map of Waze is very accurate and very good quality of road map. And my point here is to say that through these 3 forms of data, public institutions can act to regulate Waze service and co-produce traffic regulation. First, they can act by changing the road infrastructure to change Waze data. The first solution is a radical one. It's the most used solution in US cities. It's just to impose commute hour left and right turn restrictions to avoid residential streets. So here it's a little town in New Jersey where they put some signs of restriction in turn to avoid diverted traffic. But here it's another example. It's quite funny because don't cross your app. You don't have. You can't turn left during from Monday to Friday in the afternoon. And but public authorities can also adapt the road infrastructure to reduce driving speed. The idea is to game the algorithm by making these residential roads less prioritized by the app, since the average speed will be lower. And to do that, public authorities can physically change the street layout. You can put some one-way streets or reduce usable driving space, remove car lanes, so it would be the speed will be lower. You can also reduce speed by implementing crosswalks, traffic lights, speed bumps, and other kind of physical infrastructure. And by doing so, you have a kind of mechanism of retroaction between the physical infrastructure, the algorithm, and the Waze data. The second means of action is through the map database and the community of map editors. As I said, Waze maps are edited by volunteers, and some of these editors spend hours daily to improve and actualize the map. Even if the quality of the map is good, they still have to add construction projects or temporary road closure, and they can still update the map. And they fix everything that's wrong. And the community is very structured with different kind of editing ranks. And in France, you have like a little bit more than 1,300 regular editors, 10,000 in total, and so it's a very strong community. And these people are volunteers, so it's really impressive. And these volunteer map editors have the feeling of working for the public interest, for the common good. As one of them told me, people often tell us you are masochist. You work for free for a US private company. It's true, but it's a patient. I am not paid, I am a volunteer, but I am glad to have the feeling of participating in something important. And what is interesting is that the map editors have a large freedom to edit the map and to classify roads. And by the time they have developed a great expertise of Waze algorithm, they are able to avoid routing through some neighborhoods by changing the road classification into the map database. Here you have an example from California on the Waze Map Editors Forum, so it's near San Francisco, I think. And you can see a claim from one resident who asked for help because of so much traffic in its neighborhood. And the answer of the map editors who have solved this problem by underclassifying the road on the database, and so it will not be prioritized in the Waze algorithm. And so the first guy is very grateful because it was very effective and it's quite impressive. Here you have it's on the map. It's this road, and so you can see here it's now a private road. And before it was a street, so it's, the street was underclassified in the map database. And it's interesting because some map editors have also developed informal relationships with public servants who ask them to underclassify some roads in order to avoid massive routing to some neighborhoods. So it's in France, in a city near Paris, and some public servants ask the editors, we have noticed that there is more and more traffic in this neighborhood, can you do something? And indeed, through the map editing, the road classification, the properties they give to the road section, they can do something. They can guide the algorithm to make the right choices. And these examples are very interesting because volunteer map editors have become a part of the public policy. It's a new kind of political participation through the production of data, and it's very innovative and very interesting. I would like to go further on it in research later. And you can see also on Twitter, so it's in French, but you have some exchange between public authorities and local map editors, and it's the city of Bordeaux who asked a local editor to update the map due to work on one road, and it's with an accident. So it's really three kinds of actors. You have public authorities, the Waze company, but also local volunteer map editors, and all can act on data to co-produce the regulation of traffic through Waze app. And the last way of acting on Waze data is through data exchange partnership, an official one. Indeed, in 2014, Waze launched the Connected Citizen Program, which is a free data exchange partnership between public bodies and the company. And so Waze provides a data feed for the specific monitored area that includes system-generated traffic jam and the user-reported traffic incident. And in exchange, public authorities give Waze road closure data. And so the company indicates that having more than 600 partners in 50 countries, and in the US, for instance, 50% of US Department of Transportation are members of this program. And in France, we do not have so much partners, only 10, it's not a lot. And for instance, in LA, the city of LA Metro and Caltrans have a partnership with Waze. And the partnership can be seen as a win-win partnership. Why? Because for Waze, it gives us access to a crucial information, which is information on road closures, on anticipated road closure, like construction or sport events, such marathons. And for public authorities, the CCP is an opportunity to better inform its citizens, especially in case of major infrastructure works, and to avoid to send traffic to close the road. And it is also a means to keep the control of the information given to drivers, even if it's through another media. And that's why you have some local transportation authorities which make the promotion of the application. So here it's the city of Nancy, in the east of France, on Twitter. They invite people and their citizens to download the Waze app and to use it because they have a large plan of work in the center of the city and they want to avoid major problems. And so it's quite interesting because the Waze it's considered like another media by the city of Nancy. So here it's the local newspaper, the local radio, and through this kind of partnership, we can say that it's a kind of redeployment of public policies through data in the digital era. And one of the world manager in France told me, I think that my key role, my added value as a public servant, as a public authority, is to produce data. And it's not to produce a service, it's not to produce the algorithm, but I have to focus on data and produce quality data. And I think we have a kind of new division of tasks between public and private actors, and public actors focus on the production and the provision of quality data, whereas private actors develop the digital services based on this data. So it's very similar to open data policy, and I think, for me, it's as a political scientist, I think that as the emergence of a new form of government, an indirect one, through the provision of public data, which strengthen the semantic power of public institutions. Public institutions keep and maintain the core power of telling what it is through the circulation, the use of their data. So it's quite interesting to see how open data and how use of public data by private actors is a sign of strengthen the power of public institutions. As a conclusion, I think I have demonstrated that big data change the semantic power of public institutions, but to say what it is, people coordinate with each other from other representation of the reality. However, public institutions do have the capacity to influence the production of these alternative realities. I would also like to highlight the benefits of political sociology of urban data. Indeed, data reveals new relationships between public and private actors in local public policies, and I think rather than oppose these two ways of regulating traffic, it is necessary to analyze the interactions between public authorities, Waze, and the community of editors, of volunteer editors, and through that they can emerge a kind of co-production of traffic regulation through the production of data. And this study opens, I think, at least two more perspectives of analyze. The first one is to consider the digital city as a post-network city. You know that our industrial cities are very structured by network and utilities, transportation network, utilities network, and it's a very characteristic of our industrial cities. But with digital technology, we have new kind of data which are not tied with infrastructure, with network, and a new kind of services such as Waze, which provoke different kind of regulation, but also different kind of use of practice of the urban space, which are not structured, determined by networks, not so much as before. And maybe it will change the urban form of the city, and I think data have an impact of this physical infrastructure, and we can ask what will be the urban form of the post-network city. The other perspective is to analyze the use of Waze data by public authorities, because the partnership of data exchange between Waze and public authorities is in both ways, and maybe public policies can change if public authority use new kind of data. Maybe they will change also the way they regulate their network and the way they think about the city, and I would like to analyze it a little bit more. The last point I would like to focus on is to ask myself if this model of analysis could be more general to analyze the transformation of public authorities in the digital era. And so we had some element of this discussion with Michael about the fact that information, data, cartographic, statistics are very at the core of the process of nation-state building. And so you have all the works by James Scott about the state as a peacekeeper and the semantic power of institutions and so on. And with digital platforms such as Waze, the activity of this platform is based on data, and they produce alternative lists to develop their intermediation services between offer and demand. And so states are challenged in their capacity of producing lists by these new actors. For instance, Airbnb provides an alternative list of touristic accommodation, Uber an alternative list of drivers, and Facebook an alternative list of digital identities versus traditional civil registry. And all of these alternative lists challenge the capacity of regulation of public institutions. Because they do not have access to this list, they can't regulate the Uber drivers. They can't regulate the Uber accommodation in some cities. And I think that one regulation of these platforms is through the convergence of these alternative lists, this public and the private list on private information. For instance, now in Paris, but also in other cities in the world, Airbnb hosts must register their accommodation, and so the city office now have a list of Airbnb accommodation, and then they can regulate it. It's similar with Uber drivers. And now in France, Uber driver must pass a test and must pass an exam, and it will give the city a list of all Uber drivers, and so it's easier after to regulate them. And French state is also developing a project to converge physical and digital identities, which is called the France Connect, to have like digital identities which can compete with the Facebook identities on the web. Thank you.
So thank you, Antoine, for a very rich presentation. We have time for some questions and discussion. So who would like to go first? And I'll try to act as a bit of a moderator. You in the back, please, and then you.
So, very interesting presentation, thank you. So, one of the questions I had was that, that we have, as you pointed out, a lot of issues in a lot of cities. People are complaining about that the drivers are coming to very small residential streets because of Waze. I found the concept of map editors pretty interesting because I really hadn't heard about that. But so my question was that is there any movement either in Europe or in the US? Because in the US the roads are already categorized. So we have roads that say this is a major arterial, this is a minor arterial, and to work with Waze to see that certain classifications of roads should not be included in their route algorithms. Because instead of people calling somebody and saying that take my particular road out of your algorithm, to have some sort of institutional way of telling Waze that don't include these kind of roads in your algorithm.
Actually, it is. It's another example I have here. You can see that it's one editor. And he's saying that in the US, but it's also the same in France, that to classify the words,
right,
they use the functional classification, which is a legal one. And you have this kind of table to see what kind of road can be classified, such as here it's the Waze classification, major, minor, and so on, private streets, and here it's the functional classification and the legal one. So
Right.
it's another example of the fact that road classification and underclassified roads to avoid routing traffic to some areas, it's not always working. For instance, here's the explanation. It's quite interesting to say that maybe the Waze send traffic to some areas, but it's not the responsibility of Waze because we are using the functional classification, and maybe it's the blame must be put on the functional classification, which is not good and which over-classifies some residential areas.
So they are using the road classification right now?
Yeah. They try to do it, there's some like categorization, and they try to align the functional classification with Waze classification of roads.
Okay, yeah, because I can tell you that none of the cities are aware of this because I am on the Transportation Commission of one of the cities, and I have been to the roads that are really small, and they would make you a detour for maybe like 100 feet, and it makes no sense. When I'm on the road, I'm wondering why am I here, right? So yeah, which is there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Yeah.
But maybe it depends on for each specific street. But for this instance, it's in Los Angeles. It's a Congress Street. I don't know where it is. I do not know very well Los Angeles, but it's classified as a primary street because functional classification classified this street as it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also had a question on road editing, so it was somewhat clarified by your answer, but so are these classified, is this classified automatically, or do the volunteers classify these roads?
No, the volunteers classify.
Okay, so my question is, so when a road editing request comes in, like, doesn't that kind of open the floodgates to close all sorts of roads? Like, how do they sort of, how do they control that? Because I guess that they're getting requests to close a whole bunch of roads by cities or by residents. So what, like, where do they determine where to close a certain road, or where does mark it private so that Waze doesn't direct drivers to that area?
Well, it does have lots of freedom to classify the roads.
So can anyone be an editor? I guess?
Yeah, no, you have to be a Waze user, but then, so you have to circulate through the road to then have the abilities to edit it. Mm-hmm. And but the fact is that you have different levels of editing, and so you have level 1 to level 6. Level 6 you can edit all the words, and some words are blocked because it's a major word, and they do not want to have some misuse of.
Because yeah, someone could block Bullshit Boulevard, for example, like a major arterial in theory, right?
It will not work because
it
will be blocked by the work of editing.
Okay.
So you have to gain some points to have the ability to edit all the words and to change everything.
Okay, so someone at the high level could block any road in theory?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'm wondering when do they determine, do they get a lot of these requests of road editing, or is it not so common? They just feel like everyone would want their street to be, if they live in a residential street, everyone would want it to be sort of edited out.
But it's not so common. Well, it's some extract from the forum of the Waze editor in California, and I have like 2 or 3 examples.
Okay.
But the city of Los Angeles can edit the map, and they have a level 3. The problem is that level 3 you can't do everything.
Okay.
So they can do only like put some work closure for some big events, and but they would like to have a higher level of editing just to be sure that some words will be overclassified.
And is the road classification request, is that made through the app? Do you email someone? How is that?
I think you can make a request through the app,
Okay.
map request.
Okay.
But you can also email or put a message on the Waze store.
Okay.
Because you can just have to log in with your Waze
Okay.
ID on the.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
I mean, quick question. Do you foresee down the road that public authorities, like urban cities and such, using Waze as a justification for public policy, like, for example, like congestion pricing and such? I mean, it's real good data, they have access to it. You don't see that reasons information.
Not for pricing congestion. I think they use it mainly to evaluate some of their policies about closing a lane and see if congestion will be higher or not. But also, actually, the city of Los Angeles use Waze data, but only as a complementary information in their traffic control room to see some events which are reported by Waze users, and it's just a complementary source of information for them.
Could it become a policy influencer down the road?
I don't know. Well, I don't know. It's a further part of my research, and in France it's not very common. In the US a little bit, but it depends on the capacity of the city to use this new kind of data, because you need to have some skills, and you need to have some to understand it and to use it actually to change your policy.
Any other? Yes, please.
I think the existence of the editors kind of highlights this untapped workforce within the community of people who are really willing to invest time to kind of communicate their needs, I guess, to somebody who has power. Did you like see who, like, do profiles of who these people are? Like, are they just normal commuters? Are they people who have lots of extra time because they're retired? Or like, I'm just curious, like, if this population overlaps with people who come to community meetings in LA when we have like forums about lots of different issues, or if it's just this completely different body of people who are very like technologically oriented and like just want a really fast commute but are willing to put in a lot of time to save a little bit of time, like.
Well, I do not know for US and for LA, but in France it's mainly men who are drivers, who are well educated, and who use car every day to go to work. And so it's like a passion, so they leisure every night to edit a mail, and it's quite addictive in fact. But they I have to, and I didn't make a special investigation about this kind of, on the profile of these editors, but I think they do not have so much other political engagement.
So if I could add, I think you've just identified what could be a very interesting research project.
Yeah.
Right? To do some kind of analysis and profile of who are these editors, and the second part of your observation, which is where do they overlap or not overlap with other forms of community involvement? There's just a lot to know out there about this emerging phenomenon.
I get the impression now that they're kind of like teenage video game players who have grown up and become working professionals.
It's Wikipedia editors.
Wikipedia, Bitcoin players,
Right.
all these people.
Maybe you know OpenStreetMap.
Uh-huh.
OpenStreetMap, it's a similar kind of project of free cartography, free map database. And lots of these map editors are not editing in OpenStreetMap. And it's quite interesting because it's quite similar to the way you edit on the add the information. But the Waze editors think they are very useful for the community, because when you edit one night, the day after you can see the results on the app. And so it's a very useful, and the feeling of being working for the command group. quite interesting.
I realize this may not be exactly what you're trying to talk about, but in terms of the system by which people become editors, does OpenStreetMap have like ranks that people can achieve the way that editors for Waze can?
I don't know. I am not sure OpenStreetMap has this kind of.
I wonder if that just contributes to people like trying to like ascend in the ranks of Waze editing.
I actually have a question really. Can the editors talk to one another, or can they only talk to the company? What is the nature of the communication? So assume that you're a rank 3 editor of Waze. Do you know who the other rank 3 are, and is there collaboration, or are they isolated?
No, there is collaboration because you can see, I don't know, but at the end of each, you can see who modified the word section, the word segment before you, and you can send him a message to say, oh, why have you done that, and so on. So there is also a strong forum on the internet. There is some local meetings of Waze editors in each city, in France and in US, and they do not have so much interaction with the company actually. The Waze organized one meeting a year with top rank editors in France and in Europe, but
a human face-to-face meeting.
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah.
Okay.
But they do not have so much exchange, and actually the editors are very free, and they are very large freedom to edit the mail, to make some very political choices by their classification and the editing of the map.
So the editors are allowed to classify the roads?
The words?
No, are the editors allowed to classify the roads?
Yeah.
Really?
That's what they do, yeah.
They're the only ones that.
Yeah, but it's this interface. So if it's the word segment, you select it, and then you can, so the address, the word type, so here it's a primary street, and you can say it's a paved, a tunnel, you can say it's the speed limit, 2-way or 1-way, here it's locked to editor 1-2, and the elevation and other kind of information.
So
you can put some closures and for
no, I can
temporary
understand closure, so they don't need any approval from Waze to reclassify the street?
No, you as a Waze user, you can log in and edit the map. You will not be able to edit everything, but some level 1, you can edit and change information on the database.
Yeah, no, that I understand, but I'm just surprised that the editors are allowed to classify the street, because if that was the case, people would pay money to get their street, be classified as a different street. I mean, there is so much outrage in LA right now about Waze bringing traffic to their streets. It's fascinating. I'm just surprised.
Actually, the classification of street, it's not the major information which is used by the algorithm. The first one is time speed. And so if the road will be fast, the algorithm will prioritize this kind of roads. And the second information then is the classification of the road.
And is there anything in Waze algorithm that tries to balance the traffic? Because one of the things that at least as a as a traffic engineer and as a user of the road, I find is that everybody is, when there is a diversion, everybody is being sent to the same place. That that they don't necessarily try to balance the network.
Yeah, but actually now they have changed the algorithm to avoid creating new congestion in other areas by sending all the traffic to the same alternative way. So they send in different ways.
Okay. Different. I see. Thank you. Very good.
Other remarks or questions?
I was curious, have you thought about how Waze is going to be developing once autonomous vehicles come online, what the impact would be? Are they changing? Are they going to change their existing model to address that?
Yeah. I do not know exactly, but what I can say is that they do have a lot of information about drive on the everyday on commute drive, so it's very valuable to develop the carpool system. And they say they want to retire or to take out cars from the road by developing this kind of carpooling system. But actually, it's only in some cities in the US for now, I think.
It's available here as well.
Yeah.
Waze carpool, yeah.
Okay. But it can be very huge. Because, for instance, in France, we have a lot of companies which try to develop this kind of system, but they do not have the minimum level of users to be valuable and benefit.
Yes, it's more but firstly, as a French woman driver, I use Waze very, very often, and I don't participate in the community at all. Just maybe to say, okay, there was an accident, but that's it. More seriously, I think at the end of your presentation, you said how the urban form can change with your Waze. And I think that Waze is terrible about the knowledge of cities. For example, the drivers, urban drivers, don't know at all the city. And for the users, it's like you are in a video game, but you don't know where is the north, the south, where is this place located. It's terrible. When I use Uber, I'm so surprised that the driver don't know where is this place. He knows because Waze say where is it. But I think for the urban perception, it's not a good way. I don't know if it can change, but I noticed that all the drivers don't know the city, thanks to Waze.
That's so interesting because...
and I think it can change very deeply the perception of urban form.
Okay. But what is very interesting is that Waze is owned by Google. And it's quite similar on the internet and the web. So you are completely disoriented and you need Google to be oriented and to navigate on the web. And it's similar on the city now, and with data you can change more actively the city and the world and so on. And now you will be in the future, I think, dependent from Google and the Waze to navigate and to circulate inside the city. And it's very interesting. I don't know if you so the smart city, the Google smart city company Cyberclass is developing a project in Toronto, and they want to change actually the occupation of the streets during the day. So, for instance, in the morning you will be able to use the car in the one street, but maybe in the afternoon or in the evening it will be only for bikes or for pedestrians. And so the permanent change of the city, of the street, will be even more disorientated for people. So you will need this kind of tools and this kind of device, this kind of GPS to move inside the city. So it will be Google dependent for our move, I think.
We're drawing to the end of our time, so I want to thank Antoine and just remark that I think that what's really fascinating about this kind of research is obviously about concrete issues like traffic and circulation and transit in the city. But as you can see, it's about much more than that. It's about the role of governance in general and the transformation of a whole host of relationships between people, space, and political institutions. And Antoine's research, I think, is a very nice scoping out of what we in studying cities are just at the very beginning of. So, thank you very much for coming. And this is just the beginning of this long collaboration between UCLA and Sciences Po. Thanks a lot.